Hello and welcome. This is a demo on how to build an Android application with a button on the UI. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a new Android application project. If it's not listed here, you can go down to Other and find it that way. So I give it a name. I'm going to call this one Button Demo. And then I could change the package here. So for example, ca.mydemo. And normally that would be something else that would refer to maybe your institution you work at or your school. Most of the defaults here will be fine, so I'll just whip through the interface to create a new blank activity. It'll come up with the activity on the screen. Now in order to get the button to work, there's a couple of things we've got to do. First, I actually have to create the button on the UI, so that's going to be in my XML. Then second, I actually have to wire it up to make it do something, and that's in the Java code. So first let's look here at my UI. We can see here in the top right I've got a relative layout, so that describes how things are laid out on the screen, and inside of it I only have the one element, which is my text view. So I'm going to drag and drop a new button in. So here's my button, and let's just put it right underneath that text. Now I can click on it and I can change its information. So let's change its ID here. I can click the extra little dots there to bring up this thing, and let's make it btn. Let's call it display message. Make it an action. And so now we can see that it's changed its name here in the layout. I can change the text to display a message. And we see here it's maybe moved a little on screen, not quite how I want it. I can drag it back, recenter it. Okay, so if I go into the XML, we can actually see what it's done for me. It's got the statement that's going to generate a new ID with the name that I gave it. The button's going to resize to the text that's put into it. We're going to move it just below. It's going to be placed just below this text view. Centered, yes. And we give it some text here. It's got an exclamation mark here for the moment, but we don't worry about that. We'll come back and talk about that a bit later on. Okay, so let's go and actually wire it up. I'll go under Source here, under my package, and open up the main activity. It turns out we've got the onCreate and the onCreate options. I'm not going to use an option menu at the moment, so I will delete that just for simplicity. Now we need to wire up the button to actually do something for us. I could put the code right here in the onCreate, although I tend to like to have most of my wire-up functions kind of separate. It keeps things in small packages that are easily maintainable. So let's create a function for it. So let's call this set up the message button. Seems reasonable. And I can go Control-1 in Eclipse. It'll bring up the list of options. I want to automatically create the method that didn't previously exist. And now I can go ahead and now work with a button. So there's two steps here. I'll write some comments to describe what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to get a reference to the button. And then second, I'm going to set the click listener to run my code. And we'll write some code that actually does that. So first, let's get a reference to that button. It was defined in the XML. Now I want to use it in my Java code. So here I'm going to create a variable. Let's call it message button equals, and I'm going to find view by, and I can just type in a bit of it in and control space to autocomplete. And then I can type in how it is I want, what element I want. The way we specify a view is through its ID. So an ID is all in the R class. So r.id dot, and then this shows me a list of all the IDs that have been processed. Now you'll note my button isn't listed. Well, what happened? Well, if I go back here, if I look at the XML code, we can say, well, this statement tells the Android tools to generate that ID, but it hasn't happened. Why? Well, if we look up here in the top left, I have yet to save my file. So if I save the file, what then is going to happen is Android tools are going to reprocess and regenerate this file called r.java. It is an automatically generated file. Don't bother editing this file. But we can see in here, under the ID class, it has put in an ID now for my button display message. So if you're wondering why you type in that r.id, well, you're inside the R class. You're looking at a static final class inside named ID, so r.id, and then inside of that we've got all of these values that we can use. So let's go back to our Java code. So I'm now going to go find it back down here. We've got r.id, and I'll go control space to bring up this list again, and we can now see that our ID for the button is correctly listed here. Now there's one more thing that we need to do. This view, if we look at the tooltip, if we bring the tooltip back here, there we go, it's going to return a view. As we can see here, it returns a view. Well, button inherits from view, but we have to cast it to make sure we get the right type of object reference. So I need to say this is going to be a button. We're just casting it. Of course, if I said this was going to be a text view, it would throw an exception when it tried to do the cast. So I'll go back to button. Save the file. Of course, we got a few errors here. The button, it doesn't know what that is. I'll go Control 1 to bring up the autofix. Make sure you carefully import these things. You want to make sure that you've imported the right stuff. If you import the wrong thing, it can cause errors, particularly if you import Android.R. Try not to import Android.R. So we'll import the button, and we've gotten rid of our compile problem. Next, I need to set up the on-click listener. I've got the button. I need to set the on-click listener. So I can say message button. I can just type a bit, control space to complete it. Dot set on, and it brings up a listing here. And indeed, we want the on-click listener. So this registers a piece of code to be executed when the user clicks on the button. So we are creating a listener for an event. Now this is the kind of funny part. We're going to create an anonymous class to actually implement our listener. So the way we do that is we specify what it is we're working with. So it's under the view.onClickListener, view being the parent class, or our super class. So I'll double click on that, and then I'll go control or brackets, or rather here, let's go back, control space, select it from the list, hit enter. So it's gone like that. And what I need to do is I need to say I want a new one of these. And I'll just show you the magic here of Eclipse. Hit enter. Having said I want a new entity or new object of that type, it then fills in the required fields here. So this is creating a new instance of an object of type view.onClickListener. Well, it turns out this is just maybe an interface that we can use. Then we have to actually explicitly say what's going to happen. So it puts in these curly braces to say, well, you're going to declare your class here. This is what makes it an anonymous class. So this anonymous class we then provide our own code for. I need to put the semicolon here at the end to complete this previous statement. All of this is one Java statement. So in the middle, I now put my code here, whatever it is I want to have happen whenever we click the button on the UI. So one fun thing to do is, well, the easiest thing to do is use the log function. So I can say log.I for maybe info. I give it a tag for whatever my application is. So maybe demo button app, and then whatever message. So you clicked the button. Save that. It doesn't know what log is. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's actually see this in action. I'll go Control F11, and that's then going to run this application inside of my Android emulator. I've already got the emulator running here. It does take a minute to launch, usually. So now, let me go back over here. I'll move this just slightly off to the side so we can see it actually has popped up now in the background. I can click Display Message. Now, it doesn't look like anything's going on, but we can see the window popped up over here. It saw that the log cat was happening. It's asking, do I really want to watch it? And I say yes. And let's say for info, say OK. Stretch it out. It's now brought up this log cat to show me information from my application coming in, which is very handy. So this is going to be a very common way of getting information about your activity. Move this back to fill the screen. Now that's not particularly interesting. We want something to happen on the UI. So in addition to this, I can come here and I can put up a toast. So I can say toast. It's a class built into Android. I can say make Control space, and it gives me some options. So I need to give it a context. I need to give it an activity. Now the activity, I might normally just say this, but this is now referring to this inner object here. This is the class we're working inside of. So that's not good enough. I need to get out of this somehow. So to get out of it, I say, well, I want main activity dot this. And that says not the current object that we're sitting inside, but the sort of the object that's outside of this. I can give it some text. So you clicked it. And then a duration. Now the easiest way to get a good duration is to go toast inside the toast class again that we're currently sitting in, and then pick, do you want a short one or a long one? Let's go a long one just so it comes up better. Now we're not done yet. We've just created one. We've used the static factory method make text to make one. But I'll go down here on the next line. I need to call .show on that toast. So maybe we could reorder this in a couple lines just to make it clear what's really going on. So inside of make text takes 3 arguments, 1, 2, and 3. And then once I'm done making it, I'll call .show on it. That's one way to look at it. If you've got a little bit more screen space than I have here, you might put it all together. So now, when I rerun the application, it'll ask me, do I want to save? Of course I do. Switch back to my application. I don't need to close it or anything. The Android tools will automatically close the application, then relaunch the new application when it comes up. So click on it, and then we see the toast message popping up. You clicked it. So that concludes what I wanted to show with the button. Let's look at a couple more refinements I can do. One thing is, this string should actually be the tag. So what we want to do is I will cut that out. I'll put a tag here, and we'll go up to the top of our class and insert a final variable or a constant for that. So this can be my private, and it's going to be a final. It's a string. I'm making it tag, uppercase because it's a constant, equals that. So that way I can use this tag over and over throughout my application if I've got multiple logs. Now a couple other things I want to do. It's got a warning here because it was previously using this menu. I don't need that anymore, so I will remove it with Control D. That now removes that warning. If I save it, the exclamation mark is gone. If I go back here to the activity, we can see that it's not yet happy with this. Control 1 brings up some ideas. Extract string is going to extract this string and put it in strings.xml. So I'm going to do that here. So we give it a name, display a message, sounds like a reasonable name, so I'll click OK. It's now switched this to say from the strings set, give me display a message. This happens to be the name. I'll save the file, it should compile that. And then if I go to values on the left, open strings, let's actually look at the XML, and we have display a message, and this is the text that was just extracted. So it's better to put all your strings in the strings.xml because that allows us to internationalize more easily. So I will save that file, and what's it complaining about here? A hard-coded string, it just hasn't realized that we've updated that. So now if I run the application, it'll look identical. So that concludes the demo that I wanted to show here. What have we learned? We learned that we want to use the XML to put a button. We configure the button with its ID. We give it some text, which we want to have in strings.xml. I'll click on that so we can see what we really worked with here. Then under the Java file, inside of onCreate, I created a method named setUpMessageButton, and I implemented that just below it. So this allows me to keep my onCreate much cleaner. Inside of my setUpMessageButton, the first thing I need to do is I get a reference to the button with findViewById. I then set the onClickListener on that object, and I'm using an anonymous class here to do so. Now one thing I can show you is that what we can do is instead of having that all sit here, I'm going to cut this. I'll say Control X, and I'll paste it here. Now what this came out to be, this is as a view.onClickListener. I could give this a name if I wanted, so myListener. I can just show you that how we can do this as using not an anonymous object. So I can now copy that and put it down here. This is the same structure as we had before. I think, what's missing? Yes, that'll do it. Same structure as I had before, except I've just moved this to be a named object. So I've given it a name. There's no real benefit to doing this. It's just to help some people understand what is really going on. This is instantiating an object of type. Well, what's the type? It's this new thing I've created. It's an anonymous class. And the anonymous class inherits from view.onClickListener. Alright, that concludes this demo. Please look for other demos to show other aspects of the Android programming.